The night the road almost took everything from him began with a warning he chose to ignore, a flicker on the dashboard and a hollow ache in his chest that told Daniel Carter he was running on fumes in more ways than one. The rain had been falling for hours, blurring the highway into a ribbon of shadows and light, and in the back seat 3 small bodies slept in uneven rhythm, the soft rise and fall of triplets who trusted him with their entire world. He did not know yet that pulling over on that empty roadside would crack his life open and rebuild it into something unrecognizable, something bigger than survival, something that would teach him what it truly meant to save and be saved. Before the story pulls you deeper, take a moment right now. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the quiet power of doing the right thing when no one is watching, please like this video, share it with someone who needs hope today, subscribe to the channel for more stories that matter, and tell us in the comments where you are watching from. Your support keeps stories like this alive. Daniel had not planned to be a single father, and he certainly had not planned to raise triplets alone. Life had collapsed in a single year, the kind that rearranges every priority without asking permission. His wife Emily had been the center of their small universe, the calm voice during chaos, the one who laughed when the babies cried all at once. Then illness came quietly and left loudly, and suddenly Daniel was learning how to braid hair, measure medicine, stretch groceries, and keep promises he was terrified he could not keep. He worked 2 jobs when he could, slept when the children slept, and learned to live with the permanent weight of responsibility pressing against his ribs. Love was no longer a feeling but a discipline, practiced daily through exhaustion. That night he was driving home from a late shift, the triplets strapped safely behind him, worn out from a long day at daycare and a quick dinner eaten in the car. The road was mostly empty, the kind of stretch where billboards grew rare and gas stations even rarer. Daniel's mind drifted to bills waiting on the kitchen counter and a broken washing machine he could not yet afford to fix. He was calculating how far the gas would take him when a shape on the shoulder of the road caught his eye, something pale against the wet asphalt, too still to be debris and too human to ignore. He slowed instinctively, heart pounding, every sensible thought screaming that stopping with 3 children in the car was a risk he could not afford. The rain intensified, drumming against the windshield like urgency itself. As he pulled closer, the shape resolved into a woman lying half on the gravel, half on the pavement, her clothes soaked, her hair plastered to her face. She did not move. There were no other cars, no lights, no easy answers. Daniel felt the familiar battle rise inside him, the constant calculation of danger versus duty that had become second nature since he became a father. He pulled over. The moment the engine stopped, fear rushed in to fill the silence. He locked the doors behind him, glanced back at the triplets to make sure they were still asleep, and stepped out into the rain. The cold soaked through his jacket instantly, but he barely noticed. The woman's skin was cold to the touch, her breathing shallow and irregular, her pulse faint but present. Relief and panic collided in his chest. He had no medical training beyond basic first aid, no phone signal strong enough for comfort, and 3 children who depended on him making it home alive. Daniel did what people do when instinct overrides fear. He shielded her from the rain as best he could, dragged her carefully to the back seat, and laid her. Across the seats he had just checked for sleeping children. The triplets stirred but did not wake. He drove with a focus he did not know he possessed, hazard lights flashing, eyes scanning the road for the nearest hospital sign like it was a lifeline thrown from the darkness. By the time he reached the emergency room, his hands were shaking. Nurses rushed the woman away, questions came in rapid succession, and Daniel answered what he could, explaining that he had found her on the roadside, that he was alone with his children, that he did not know her name. He sat under fluorescent lights, rainwater dripping from his sleeves, feeling the delayed tremor of what could have gone wrong. When a social worker offered to watch the triplets while he filled out paperwork, he nodded, grateful and numb. Hours passed in fragments. The triplets woke, confused and hungry, and Daniel soothed them with snacks and whispered reassurances, his voice steady even as his thoughts spiraled. Eventually a doctor approached him, eyes tired but kind, and told him the woman had been dangerously dehydrated, suffering from exposure and complications from an untreated condition. Another few hours in the rain and the outcome would have been very different. Daniel absorbed the words slowly, the weight of them settling into his bones. When the woman finally woke, she was disoriented and weak, her eyes searching the room with fear that softened into confusion when she saw Daniel holding a baby bottle and rocking one of the triplets on his knee. Her name, they learned later, was Grace Miller. Life had not been gentle with her either. A series of losses had pushed her into a downward spiral of poor decisions, missed appointments, and a pride that kept her from asking for help until her body gave out on the side of a forgotten road. Grace stayed in the hospital for days. Daniel visited when he could, sometimes with the triplets in tow, sometimes alone between shifts. He did not know why he kept coming back. Perhaps it was guilt, or curiosity, or the simple human need to see a story through once you have stepped into it. Grace listened more than she spoke, absorbing the sight of a tired man who carried fatherhood like both a burden and a badge of honor. Watching him juggle bottles, diapers, and schedules with practiced clumsiness stirred something in her she thought she had lost. Recovery is not a straight line, and neither was the change that followed. Grace had nowhere to go when she was discharged, no family willing to take her in, and limited options that did not involve returning to the same patterns that had nearly killed her. Daniel faced his own dilemma. He was stretched thin already, his life a carefully balanced tower that could topple with one wrong move. Yet the idea of leaving Grace to fend for herself gnawed at him, especially when he remembered how easily he could have driven past her that night. They agreed on a temporary arrangement that felt anything but simple. Grace would stay in the small spare room of Daniel's house until she was strong enough to get back on her feet. Boundaries were discussed, expectations set, and fears quietly acknowledged. The first weeks were awkward and tense. Grace moved carefully, both physically and emotionally, trying not to take up too much space. Daniel watched her with cautious trust, protective of his children and wary of hope. What changed everything were the small moments that never make headlines. Grace learned the rhythm of the house, the way mornings began before sunrise and evenings ended in exhaustion. She cooked when Daniel came home late, folded laundry without being asked, and sat on the floor building towers of blocks with the triplets, who accepted her without question. Laughter returned to the house in unexpected bursts, surprising Daniel with its warmth. Grace found purpose in caring, and Daniel found relief in not carrying everything alone. Months passed, and the edges of their lives softened. Grace enrolled in classes, determined to rebuild something stable. Daniel took fewer double shifts, noticing how much he had been missing. The triplets grew louder, faster, more curious, their personalities blooming under the attention of two adults who showed up every day. The house, once heavy with grief and survival, began to feel like a place where futures could be imagined again. There were setbacks, moments when old wounds reopened and trust wavered. Grace struggled with guilt over her past and fear of becoming a burden. Daniel wrestled with the idea that happiness could be temporary, that loving again might mean losing again. But they faced these fears not with grand declarations, but with consistency. Showing up, apologizing when necessary, choosing patience when it would have been easier to retreat. The real transformation revealed itself quietly. Grace's health improved, her confidence returning in increments. She found work that mattered to her, helping others who had fallen through the cracks as she once had. Daniel watched her step into this new version of herself with a pride that surprised him. The triplets began calling her by a name that felt like family, and Daniel realized one night, while watching her read them a story, that the hole Emily's absence had carved was no longer empty. It had become a space where love looked different, but just as real. Years later, Daniel would think back to that rain-soaked highway and marvel at how close he had come to choosing fear over compassion. Grace would remember waking up in a hospital bed and seeing a man with 3 children who had no obligation to stop, yet did. Their lives did not become perfect, but they became fuller, layered with gratitude and resilience. One act of kindness had set off a chain reaction, rippling outward in ways neither of them could have predicted. If this story has reached something tender inside you, if it has reminded you that small choices can change entire lives, please take a moment near the end of this video to like it, share it with someone who believes in hope, and subscribe for more stories that speak to the heart. Your engagement helps these stories find the people who need them most. Please comment below and tell us what this story made you feel, because your words might be the encouragement someone else is searching for. The road that night was dark and unforgiving, but it led Daniel, Grace, and 3 small children toward a future stitched together by empathy, courage, and the simple decision to stop when it mattered most.